Hello and welcome to the Grand Theft World. I'm your host and helmsman for this evening, Tony Myers, and today is February 26, 2023, as we navigate the tempestuous seas of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and trying to find a lighthouse of truth and a beacon of life and light by which we can try to safely arrive at the shore of truth and knowledge. I'm joined tonight by Jay Dyer.
The Brits seem to be really good at that strategy of infiltration and subversion, though, because they, if you go into the Great Game period, like when they were going against Russia, they would send spies out. Well, if you think about the way that they controlled Islam, what they would do is they would send people like T.E. Lawrence, they would send, Philby's dad, and they would become the culture. Like they would totally immerse themselves in it and even convert to the local Islamic religion. And the same thing happens what they did with it. And they would set up these kind of front groups like the Muslim Brotherhood. That was completely a British intelligence controlled operation. 100%. And I think you guys have covered the Mark Curtis book, Secret Affairs, which is a really good book because he's a Royal Society researcher who goes into the whole history of the British imperial usage of all flavors of Islam, to the radical, to the radical Wahhabi, Salafi, all the way over to like the more trying to influence even the more secular ones at times. And the CIA picked that same strategy up when at first they tried pan-Arab nationalism, pan-Arabism in the first phase of the Cold War with the CIA, and then they switched to the straight up British model of using radical Islam. So that's what you get post Brzezinski. And Copeland talks about that in his biography. He's like, yeah, for a while we had in Egypt and Syria the strategy of moderate Islam, modern, secularized Islam to create pan-Arabism. He's like, but we couldn't ever get any of the Arabs to get together. They were always fighting with each other. And that was the same thing that T.E. Lawrence tried to do, right? Like he was trying to unite these tribes, and then they just decided to rule them as a bunch of like fighting, divide and conquer. So same strategy, right? Where the CIA basically just picks up this method of using and funding and aiding terror. And Copeland even talks about that in his book. He's like, there's a whole section where he's like, yeah, we have to absolutely use terrorists. He's like, they're a bunch of losers, but they serve a great purpose. He sort of like psychotically just sort of like laughs about it. Like, yeah, ha, ha, ha. Isn't it funny that we have to use guys to go blow up people? But hey, it serves a good purpose. And then the Gladio books go really deep into the same model because Colby is in before he goes to be in Vietnam and run the Phoenix program, he's in Italy basically with others like Donovan running Gladio. So he's the point man with the Vatican and Pius XII in that key period in the 1950s, I think, when Gladio's first kicking off. So he's really the one that really coordinates Gladio with, I think, Pius XII.
But first, I want to get into some of the main topics tonight that we'll be covering throughout this evening. First being Russia and Ukraine. It's been a year now. The conflict, I think officially about 2 days ago, is dubbed to be a year-long conflict. And what has changed? What hasn't changed? We know about the Nord Stream pipeline. Biden made a surprise trip, an overnight trip this week, or last week, I should say, early last week. And, some air sirens went off. There was a pledge of $500 million, but then U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen came out and said, no, $10 billion, just wait and see. So we're going to get into that, try to unpack what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. There's also the situation of China and threats posed against China by the NATO member states, as well as the United States.
If Russia ever joined forces with China, American global hegemony, its power would end instantly. You'd have the world's largest landmass and largest natural gas reserves allied with the world's largest population and world's largest economy. So a Russia-China axis would be not just more powerful than the United States, but much more powerful. It would have the scale to control a lot of the world's economy and trade routes and raw materials. It could project military force that, posturing aside, we actually don't have the power to stop. If Russia and China ever got together, it would be a brand new world, and the United States would be greatly diminished. Most Americans agree that would be bad. Now, as Donald Trump predicted very clearly, that is happening. Thanks to Joe Biden's reckless and self-destructive response to the invasion of Ukraine a year ago this week, the economies of Russia and China are intertwined. Chinese spending on Russian goods has increased by more than 60%. China now imports more coal from Russia than it has in the last 5 years. Chinese shipments to Russia, meanwhile, are up by nearly 30%. Companies like Ford and Toyota pulled out of Russia. They had to, remember that? So what happened next? Chinese automakers stepped in. Chinese car makers once made less than 10% of all cars bought in Russia. Now China makes a third of them. And you can see where this is going. The same thing has happened with smartphones and countless other consumer goods. Not surprisingly, the Chinese yuan is replacing the dollar in Moscow. Chinese currency now accounts for fully 1/5 of all trades on the Moscow Stock Exchange. That's up from less than 1% last year. So these are deep and growing economic ties, and they're formal. The thing about economic ties, however, is that they lead inexorably to military ties. So it shouldn't surprise you that China is actively helping Russia in the war against NATO, which we are leading. In other words, the country with more ships than any navy in the world has united with the country that has more nuclear-armed ICBMs than any country in the world to fight us through proxy in Ukraine. Well, that's scary. And the thing is, everybody involved seems to know it's scary and just how scary it is. Our leaders understand that their push for total war with Putin, which is unnecessary, could lead to the destruction of the West. They know that, but they're doing it anyway. In an interview with a German newspaper today, the Ukrainian President Zelensky casually mentioned that, oh, by the way, the entire world may soon go up in flames. Quote, if China aligns itself with Russia, there will be a world war. There will be a world war if China aligns with Russia? Who could say something like that calmly? Since, as we just told you, China is aligned with Russia. It's already happened. That's not speculation, it's a fact. And as a result of that fact, according to Zelensky himself, hundreds of millions of people will die. No big deal, as long as we take Crimea. This is a very dark way of thinking. Zelensky himself is a very dark force. That is obvious if you watch him. It is unmistakable. Who could not see that? This man is a destroyer. He banned a Christian faith in his country and arrested nuns and priests. Oh, but he's a hero, claim our leaders, from Chuck Schumer to Mitch McConnell. No, Zelensky is not a hero. He is an instrument of total destruction. That is not a defense of his enemies, it's just true. And maybe that's why Joe Biden is drawn to him. Biden landed in Kiev today to promote another world war. Watch. Note the air raid sirens in the background. What's strange is there didn't seem to be any air raids in Kiev this morning. We checked. There were just air raid sirens at precisely the moment that Joe Biden appeared for a photo op. Even CNN's reporters on the ground in Kiev know that they've been in the city for the past 5 days and didn't hear any bombs or missile strikes or any sirens until the moment that Biden walked out for the cameras.
I've been here for the past 5 days. I have not heard any explosions. I have not heard any air sirens until about half an hour ago, right when President Biden was in the center of Kyiv.
Right. So here you have Potemkin air raid sirens, just the touch required in this, the most tightly scripted, most completely dishonest war in history, the fakest war.
In juxtaposition to that, you have the fact that while Biden's over in Ukraine, you have the continual fallout of the East Palestine train derailment disaster and controlled burn, controlled release that left a ton of dioxins, billions, I believe, of dioxins into the atmosphere through this controlled burn. You have Pete Buttigieg sort of juxtaposed to Trump making a visit there earlier this week, sort of the classic political theater, and then Buttigieg following thereafter. So we're going to get into some of the fallout of that, as well as the fact that there was a curious little thing that came out about this whole digital ID. I think it's called a My ID or something like that. So we're going to get into that, trying to understand and unpack what the heck's going on with this not only we talked about last week with predictive programming with white noise, but now this whole digital ID that was rolled out, I think November of 2022, moving into then for the population at large, for emergency personnel, then for the population at large, right before the train derailment took place. So we'll get into that, figure out, try to unpack what's happening with that, how it aligns with a lot of the transhumanist sort of eugenics movement of the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the movement towards a panopticon of technocracy and digital control.
East Palestine is known as the place to be. It's way ahead of the curve on a program to provide better treatment for anyone in the event of an emergency. I learned how it works and how it could help everyone in East Palestine. My ID provides quick medical information for emergency responders. Darlene Chapman is the outreach coordinator for this project, and she's an EMT.
If they're in a situation where they can't tell us or they don't have any family around, this is something that would make my life easier.
My ID works by taking a camera phone and pointing it at a QR code. It provides valuable medical information such as allergies, breathing difficulties, or other conditions, so you get proper treatment and care.
If anybody sees the QR code, you'll be able to scan this and get the information. So it helps that person, not necessarily just here, but anywhere in the nation.
There are a few options for My ID: a bracelet, key fob, necklace, or attachment on your watch band. You can choose the one which fits your lifestyle best. That's up to you. Orders will start in January. The fire department has already collected $5,000 in donations to help.
That's our ultimate goal. We want to be able to give this for free to the citizens and provide them with that extra layer of care so that we can better treat them.
The offer includes Unity Township, which is served by the East Palestine Fire Department. These items cost around $20 each. You can even buy it for yourself. The fire department is hoping you'll be willing to wear it.
My goal is to have 100% of our residents and the citizens we serve in the township to have one of these and be working with them to make sure that we can treat them better and provide the best service that we can.
There's also this whole curious thing. We talked about this a couple of months ago, but the WHO, sponsored by China and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The World Health Organization is about, I think we're 4 days away, 3 days away, something from possibly signing this whole pandemic treaty. We talked about Bill Gates and his whole germ team he's setting up under the auspices of the World Health Organization. That's a whole thing that sort of coincides with it. But they're getting ready to sign away national sovereignty to a supranational global organization that really does not have our best interests in mind. And we're going to try to unpack and figure out what the heck's going on with that. Is it legitimate? How it will be used? We know, according to Bill Gates, the next pandemic is, don't worry, it'll be in the next couple of years.
All right, let's get into our top story, which is, of course, U.S. sovereignty being handed over to the World Health Organization. And this happens in about 4 days, right? February 27th.
Right. So over the next few days, the World Health Organization and member states are going to work out the details of this intergovernmental negotiating body meeting that happens on February 27th. And what they're trying to do is hand over power to the World Health Organization to dictate policies for future pandemics. The Biden administration last fall released a statement with the WHO saying, we see the need for this. We like it. We think it's important. We're going to do this. We're all in. This is called the WHO CA+, so that's how I'm going to refer to it. All 194 WHO member states are going to allow the WHO the power to declare and manage global pandemic emergencies. That means they could mandate lockdowns. They could mandate vaccines. They could dictate vaccine supplies and distribution. And they can monitor and put in place surveillance of entire populations. I'm going to show you the language because I went through the CA Plus today that hands this to them. Here is what the draft of this treaty, because it's only in draft form right now. Here's what it says. Here's the vision, is that it aims for a world where pandemics are effectively controlled to protect present and future generations from pandemics and their devastating consequences, and to advance the enjoyment deployment of the highest attainable standard of health for all peoples based on the basis of equity, human rights, and solidarity, with a view to achieving universal health coverage while recognizing the sovereign rights of countries, acknowledging the difference in levels of development among countries respecting their national context, and recognizing relevant international instruments. I'm going to go through the CA+. And I'm just going to give you the worst case scenario of the things that the WHO is giving themselves power with this document. And I made a list as I went through it. One, they want to give themselves power to define the next pandemic. So what is it? What's the sickness? What's the lockdown? Or, what is it that we're running from? To determine lockdowns, give themselves surveillance power, determine treatments, vaccine mandates, vaccine distribution, vaccine IP and profits, and redistribution of pretty much everything. I'm going to show you. There's a sort of part in here that I'm like, whoa! Like they think they can literally change use of land because of pandemic prevention.
This is again the eminent domain clause that we've been talking about. We've covered this over the past few months, and this was one of the biggest things that stood out. Most people weren't covering this, is that they have the right to seize land. They have the right to seize property.
And we're going to show you the language that they give themselves this power. So because this is a draft, the WHO hasn't even defined certain powers or problems. See this working document? This is like, they were able to define what a pandemic is and what populations are, but these things are like holding pattern. Okay, pathogen with pandemic potential means they don't even know what that means yet, what it means to have a potential. These things I do not like. The things in red are the things that give me stomach ache. For instance, the World One Health surveillance means they don't know yet, but they're going to get to it. Meaning everybody surveyed, but we'll define that later. Interpandemic, I don't know what that is, like a pandemic within a pandemic. It's a meta pandemic. Finally, the one I like the least here is infodemic. We know how the
misinformation attack on,
Yes, right? So they do know how they define a pandemic. Here's the definition of pandemic. It's like a pathogen that infects human populations. But information and info pandemic is an idea linked to severe morbidity and high mortality, maybe. So will they want to link thoughts and ideas and speech to human mortality and control that too?
And then finally, we have UNESCO. Where have I heard about UNESCO? World Wildlife Fund, UNESCO, Julian Huxley, the Huxley family. It's not like they were ever into eugenics or anything like that. So we're going to get into a little bit of what was going on with UNESCO at this thing called the Internet for Trust conference. Very curious, very strange. Internet for Trust. Whose trust? That's what I'm curious to learn about. Do they have our best interests in mind? Is it about misinformation, disinformation, how they plan to control the internet and make sure that it's a safe space as we move into a cybernetic transhumanistic future for, the world and the few people that will be left there.
We also need guidelines to help shape the rules applicable to platforms themselves, and we need them now. Between now and the end of 2024, more than 90 elections will take place worldwide, and over 2 million people will be called on to cast their votes. We cannot allow these democratic processes to be swayed by dealers of disinformation, opening the door to all kinds of dangers. The regulatory work to ensure transparency, to protect democratic life is, of course, the responsibility first of states, and many of them are taking action, with at least 55 initiatives already underway. But if these regulatory initiatives are developed in isolation, with each country or region working in their own corner, they are not without risks. Information disruption is by definition a global problem, so our reflections must take place also at this scale, the right scale, the global scale, based upon common principles. Firstly, because digital giants have unrivaled international reach and technological prowess. We need our actions to be both consistent and coherent, and to ensure also that no country or region is left behind. And secondly, because regulating digital platforms is an urgent but also very delicate process if we want regulation to uphold rather than erode freedom of expression and human rights. If we do not think of solutions built around these rights, we leave the field open to dangerous incursions on freedoms. This conference has been organized so that this fundamental global discussion can take place. We are very happy that so many of you have responded to our call: government representatives, regulators, digital platforms, civil society. I would like to thank especially President Lula of Brazil and Prime Minister Jakobsdóttir of Iceland for their messages, which we will hear shortly. I also very much welcome the presence of special rapporteurs on freedom of expression from major intergovernmental organizations. We are here to listen to you, for we need all the voices, all the expertise, all the point of views, if we are to rise to this complex but essential challenge. UNESCO is proud to lead these discussions here, building on our universal vocation, our ability to gather all actors around a single table, and building on our long experience supporting cooperation and providing guidance for broadcasting regulators and press councils around the world. Together, we will continue this dialogue so that it can lead to appropriate guidelines on transparency, on accountability, and other principles. Then our goal will be to put them into practice, assisting our member states in this regard, just as we have done with communication and media laws for many decades now. And we will also continue to be a space for dialogue, including dialogue between regulators, to exchange best practices and to promote better international coordination, the necessity of which is all, I think, too clear today.
Without further ado, as we always do with this show, let's get started with Luke Rudowski from We Are Change and the Best Political T-shirts.
Oh my God, it's so nice. It's so nice.
How's the family and the children? Everybody okay?
You okay?
Fantastic.
Are you okay? Oh, it's so nice.
The only problem is we can kiss.
No, we can't. Not
No,
through
kiss
this.
like on the cheek.
Oh, I see what you mean. Go on, Phil's turn. Off you pop.
Come to G. No. Damn it. So
good to see you too.
Great
That's
It is emotional. I know, don't. I like it, but I don't like it at the same time.
This is fantastic. Oh, thank you for giving me this emotion.
Well, welcome back.
Great.
Welcome back.
That thing didn't do jack, but just lowered people's IQ and EQ. Never forget what they put you through.
Do you want to avoid feeling stuck in your current career or education path? Do you have a gut feeling that you're meant for more? Then it's time to take the next step and join Autonomy. In just 12 weeks, you'll gain the skills and knowledge you need for lifelong success. You'll learn how to overcome the scarcity mindset, unlock your true potential, and build entrepreneurship skills to become your own boss and exit the rat race. At Autonomy, you'll immerse yourself in a culture of excellence with a vibrant online community where you can interact in real time, receive instant feedback, and forge lasting relationships and business partnerships. Our course includes weekly lectures, group Q&As, integration exercises, guest lectures, and mastermind groups, all guided by our Autonomy navigator, Richard Grove. With his passion for sharing his knowledge and experience, Richard will help you achieve an independent lifestyle without the stress or research involved. Have you ever thought about having your own podcast? Then get your practice in with our Do It Live Autonomy podcast, where you'll get structure, support, and feedback to gain the experience for your own podcast. And you'll love our community forum, where you'll stay connected to fellow students worldwide and always be up to date on exciting projects, guest speakers, and new developments in Autonomy and beyond. So why wait? Take the next step and join Autonomy today. The possibilities are endless with critical thinking, communication, and productivity skills at your fingertips. Join the hundreds of graduates who have transformed their lives with Autonomy. Sign up now